Hello there, thrill seekers. According to one of my viewers, the point of Zazen is to prepare you for a Kensho or enlightenment experience. Is that true? Let's talk about that after 21 seconds of flying saucer attack by the Rezillos. Alright, that was Flying Saucer Attack in honor of the release of all the UAP or UFO files that are coming out these days. I'm not going to talk about that, at least not right now. I'm going to talk about something else. I did a video last week about what is even the point of doing Zazen or something like that. I can't remember the title. Something about what's Zazen even for? I think that's what the person asked. And I got a comment from somebody who comments on my videos frequently and a little acerbically, is that the word? He's a little, what would Nishiji Moroshi would probably call him sharp, maybe acidic or something. He comments a lot. But anyway, here's what he said. What is Zazen supposed to do? It's supposed to prepare you for Kensho. Just as stilling the water in a pool makes it clear to see through it right to the bottom, this insight is Kensho. Soto Master Keizan wrote about it in this way in his Denko Roku. Even though you may sit for an exceedingly long time so that your discursive thoughts come to an end and your feelings subside, with your body like a dead tree and your mind like ashes, without feelings arising when you come up against limits or without thoughts being stirred up when you are confronted with some situation, even though you may relinquish life whilst sitting or standing and appear to have gained complete freedom from birth and death, if you still have not reached this stage, all will be of no use to you within the dwelling place of the Buddhas and ancestors. And that comes from this book, Denko Roku. This is the translation, who's this? Hubert Neerman, I think? Yep, I'm right. Hubert Neerman translation used by Shasta Abbey. And if you want to find it, it is the case of the 42nd ancestor, the Reverend Monk Ryozan Enkan. That's what he's quoting there. This is a book of so-called enlightenment experiences of all the Zen masters of the Soto tradition from, I don't know, does it start with Dogen? No, it starts with Shakyamuni Buddha and then goes on to everybody, I guess, up until Keizan's time. Keizan was one of Dogen's successors. So that's this book. It's not clear to me, though, after reading the entire the entire chapter, that what this is referring to is what my commenter thinks it's referring to, which is Kensho. I guess, these are supposed enlightenment experiences, so I guess they're all supposed to be referring to Kensho. But this is about a kind of I guess you'd say a koan given to Ryozan Enkan. The koan is, what is it that is important that lies beneath a monk's kesa? Kesa is a robe. Ryozan replied, the unseen. Kanshi commented, the unseen exists, the unseen exists. After that, Ryozan spoke of the existence of the unseen whenever the opportunity arose. So the unseen is oh my God, let's just go into the stuff I wanted to go into rather than go into a whole thing about the unseen. There's a lot of stuff in Zen about the unseen, the unborn, that kind of thing. It's that which you cannot explain, which you cannot understand through thinking alone. But I wanted to talk about this matter of Kensho, because one of the phrases that always stuck in my mind that Dogen used in Shobogenzo was, Kensho is the animated activity of non-Buddhists. Now, I didn't get that quote quite right in my brain, so I looked it up. And it appears in Book 1 of Shobogenzo in an essay called San Sui Gyo, or sometimes San Sui Kyo, which means the Sutra of Mountains and Water. That's what we're looking at. And I did my own paraphrasing of this in my book. Which book is it called? Don't Be a Jerk. And I didn't even look at that again. It's been almost 10 years since I wrote that book, so I don't remember all the things that are in it. I'm just going by the book that I was referencing when I wrote that mostly. I was referencing other versions of Shobogenzo too, but mostly this one. So, I'm going to read you what Dogen says here about the matter of Kensho. Though moments are realized in which the mountains are seen to be adorned with 7 treasures, these moments are not the real refuge. Though visions are realized of the mountains as the area in which Buddhas practice the truth, those visions are not necessarily something to be loved. Though some have got the brains to realize a vision of the mountains as the unthinkable merit of the Buddhas, reality is not merely this. Every realization is an instance of object and subject. That's a very key point, and I hope I'll remember to come back to that later. We do not esteem such realizations as the Buddhist patriarchs' action in the state of truth. He says patriarchs. These days, a lot of people prefer to say ancestors. The original term is non-gendered. They are one-sided and narrow views, which is kind of a fascinating thing. It's one-corner pipe views is the actual phrase that's being used here. Nishijima and Cross translated as one-sided and narrow views. And I always imagine a one-corner pipe view being like, when you took the roll from inside a roll of paper towels or toilet paper when you were a kid and pretended it was not a magnifying glass, what do you call those things? A telescope. And you're blocking out everything else and looking at one little aspect of the thing. That's what he's talking about, one-corner pipe views. The moving of circumstances and the moving of mind are criticized by the great saint. The great saint means Buddha. Explanations of mind and explanations of the nature are not affirmed by the Buddhist patriarchs. Seeing the mind and seeing the nature. Now, seeing the nature is actually the word kensho, and seeing the mind is kenshin, which is kind of a synonym for the same thing. So that's what my commenter was talking about. He said, this is Dogen saying, seeing the mind and seeing the nature is the animated activity of non-Buddhists, and so on and so forth. So he's saying that all of these realizations are an instance of subject and object, and Kensho is the animated activity of non-Buddhists. In case you don't like that translation, there's people always who think, oh, this is just what Nishijima says. It's his wrong translation. So let's look at some other translations. This is the Soto Zen Text Project's translation, and their version says, seeing the mind and seeing the nature is the livelihood of other paths. And just to give you one more version, this one appears in a very good book by Shohaku Okumura called The Mountains and Waters Sutra, so it's all about just that chapter of Dogen's writings. And his version says, seeing the mind and seeing the nature is the business of non-Buddhists. So pretty much clear that that's the translation, or that's a good translation. Just wanted to get that out of the way in case people object to that. There's another bit in Shobogenzo in an essay called Shizen Bhikkhu, which is the bhikshu of the fourth dhyana, and it's a whole story about this. Bhikshu is a monk, and it's a whole thing about a monk who mistakes a certain state of mind for enlightenment. And in that essay, Dogen is also very critical of this idea of Kensho. He says, the essence of the Buddha Dharma is never seeing the nature. That's, again, Kensho. Where has any of the 7 Buddhas or the 28 patriarchs of India said that the Buddha Dharma is only seeing the nature? So seeing the nature, again, Kensho. So Dogen is very critical of this idea that Kensho is, as my commenter said, the point of Zen practice. A little insight into why that may be is in this book, Shohaku Okumura's book, The Mountains and Waters Sutra. And there's this guy named Ekan who became a disciple of Dogen's and brought along a bunch of people from a group that existed in Japan at the time called the Darumashu. Daruma is Bodhidharma, who supposedly brought Zen Buddhism from India to China. Hi, Editor Brad here. I just realized as I was making this, Ekon is the same name as the guy whose enlightenment experience, the guy who made the comment on the last video was talking about, but it's a different Ekon. So just so you avoid that confusion. There you go. Now back to me. And about this group, it says, according to conversations between Eijo and Dogen when they first met, Eijo is one of Dogen's other disciples, the practice of the Dharma Shu was the Zen of Kensho Jobutsu, which means becoming Buddha by seeing nature, so Kensho, nature, transmitted from Chinese Linji Zen, Rinzai Zen. Dogen's criticisms in San Sui Kyo, he calls it San Sui Kyo instead of San Sui Go, paragraph 10, regarding turning the object and turning the mind, explaining the nature, and seeing the mind and seeing the nature, and also his complaint in paragraph 14 about people who preferred incomprehensible talk, are all pointing toward the teaching of this particular lineage. Their basic idea is that Kensho, seeing the mind nature that is hidden inside ourselves, is enlightenment. And Dogen is very critical of this idea. And one of the things I like that Shohaku Okumura says about this is, now I'm skipping over, God, this is page 139 of the book, so I'm skipping over a lot. You're going to have to read the whole book to get the context. I don't have time to give it to you here. But here's part of what Shohaku Okumura says. Some people think that when we eliminate all thought and experience enlightenment, we are liberated. We don't have to do anything else and can be happy for the rest of our lives. I think this is a misunderstanding or even a superstition. Dogen tried to caution his students that the point is to let go of thoughts and just be as you are. No thinking is not enlightenment. That is not our goal. I have been practicing Zazen for more than 40 years, so I've experienced many conditions during Zazen. Sometimes I've had the experience of no thought, of simply being there. It was very pleasant, but from the beginning of my practice I was taught that any condition is merely the scenery of Zazen. Nishijima Roshi used to say that is just the content of your Zazen, so same kind of idea. So I don't consider it a special or good part of Zazen. Sometimes my mind is very busy and distracted, but still that is part of my Zazen. When my mind is busy, I try to sit upright and breathe deeply and smoothly and keep my eyes open. When I find that I am interacting with thoughts, I try to let go. And he goes on for quite a bit longer than that, but that's the basic gist of the thing. So let me bring it down to my own experience of the thing and see where we go with that. One of the first books I read about Buddhism was called The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau. And it was assigned by my first Zen teacher in that class called Zen Buddhism, which he did at Kent State University, which was meant to be sort of an academic overview of all sorts of Zen Buddhist stuff. So he wanted, even though Tim was part of the Soto tradition, he wanted to present the Rinzai tradition, and the best book he thought at the time to present the essence of what he thought of as the Rinzai tradition was The Three Pillars of Zen. Now, technically, Philip Kapleau was not a Rinzai teacher, but he was part of a group that tried to merge Rinzai and Soto teachings. But the thing is, most of what Kapleau says in that book sounds really almost cartoonishly, stereotypically Rinzai. I mean, it's really, really Rinzai. And it's really, really focused on this idea of Kensho or enlightenment experiences. Sometimes the word Satori is used for these experiences too, but it's kind of the same thing. And in the book, Three Pillars of Zen, there are a lot of stories near the end of contemporary American, I think they're mostly American, maybe they're European too, but contemporary Western people's experience of Satori or Kensho or enlightenment. And I read this stuff and got very excited about it because I wanted to have an enlightenment experience too. You know, I want to have enlightenment. So even though my teacher was a Soto teacher who didn't emphasize this idea of enlightenment, the seed had been planted in my head of what this enlightenment experience was. The descriptions in the book are quite fantastic. It's not merely the stopping of thought that they're talking about. They're talking about these kind of amazing, almost psychedelic sort of experiences where I think, if I remember right, there was one where I looked up at the sky and the sky was laughing with me and things like that. These amazing experiences that people had. And I got kind of lost in that and was pursuing enlightenment experiences. Now, at the time, I was dating this woman who was a born-again Christian. Don't ask about it. It's something I don't even want to think about it too much. It was a weird experience. But it was part of my own journey of myself wanting to be a Christian. I've talked about this a lot. I really wanted to be a Christian, but I just couldn't deal with the kind of Christianity that I encountered in Ohio in the early 80s when I was trying to do this. So anyway, she didn't like the fact that I was getting into Zen, and she had this conversation with Tim in which she reported back to me that Tim says you will never have an enlightenment experience. And I heard that, and I was really depressed hearing that and assuming that she was right when she said that. And I changed my outlook about Zen to, I didn't want to stop practicing Zazen because it was really working for me. It was doing all the things that I said in my previous video. Go watch that if you want to know what I was experiencing. And I really found it very useful. So I didn't want to stop practicing. So I made it the point of my practice to understand fully the unenlightened state. Because after all, if you look at Zen teachers like Huang Po, a lot of other people say this, I think maybe Master Rinzai says this too, there's no difference between sentient beings, which is ordinary people, you and me, and Buddhas. Only that Buddhas understand something that ordinary people don't understand. So I thought, well, if I really want to have an enlightenment experience, I would try to fully understand the unenlightened experience, completely. Now, years later, I don't know, a couple years later, I finally got up the nerve to ask Tim to himself. I'd broken up with that girl by then, I think. And I asked Tim to his face, you said to her that I would never have an enlightenment experience. And Tim said something like, oh, I don't remember that. But whatever, she had some weird ideas about enlightenment experiences, and I was probably trying to say that Brad will never have one of those kind of experiences because those are very weird, and she had some kind of strange ideas. So he wasn't really saying I couldn't have an enlightenment experience, but that's what I thought he was saying. And I think this is a really important way to practice. I have had a number of, when I was traveling more, talking to various Zen centers that would invite me to speak, I got to some of these, I don't know if I did speak to a couple of Rinzai places, and those were fine, and I didn't have any kind of weird experiences. But when I went to these hybrid Soto Rinzai places, there was a couple of them that stand out in my mind. The people there seemed very aggressive and very I can't really explain it. This is why I'm making strange sounds to try to explain it, but very sharp and very aggressive. And I remember a couple of times where I would be seated next to the main teacher of the group, and then I'm giving the talk, but he's sitting beside me. And he's challenging me and pushing me and being kind of aggressive and a little bit nasty to me, and saying stuff like that. And I found it very weird and unpleasant. So I kind of wonder what this practice of always reaching for an enlightenment experience does to a person. I think it makes a person very ambitious and makes a person very dissatisfied with their own life and wishing they had this great experience that they assume is going to fix everything. Now, I've also talked, and I'm not going to talk about it at length again, but I've done a few videos on this about my so-called bridge experience that I wrote about in the books Hardcore Zen and the book There Is No God and He Is Always With You, in which I was crossing a bridge on my way to work, and I had this experience that was, almost like one of the things that I'd read about in the Philip Kapleau book, but not exactly. And that was an amazing experience. It was very important, very meaningful to my life, and very useful and very good. And some people have labeled that a Kensho experience. Some writers, Buddhist writers who talked about my book, referred to that as my Kensho experience. I don't like to use that word for it, but I think that's what people expect of Kensho. And that experience was very good, transformative, meaningful, useful, but it also didn't fix everything. A lot of really crummy things have happened in my life, a lot of stuff I had to deal with, especially this illness that I'm dealing with right now, and all the various treatments and things. Those all happened. And I tell you what, far from being like an ultimate goal and something that fixes everything, if you would have given me a choice of either having that Kensho experience or not having this illness, I'd probably choose not having this illness over having that Kensho experience. Because that Kensho experience, while being very useful and meaningful and profound, it also didn't fix all the things that when I had expected the Kensho experience was going to fix everything, I expected it to fix. Does that make sense? I don't know. I think my grammar got weird there. So I think there's a good reason why Dogen emphasized this idea that Kensho is not the goal of Zen practice, and that striving for Kensho is just getting in the way of you experiencing your life as it is right here and now, just this. And I think that's really important. And just to tell you that most of the Rinzai people I've encountered understand that. Shozan Jack Haubner especially understands that very well. He's the guy who does the Zen Confidential YouTube channel, which everybody should watch. And he understands that very well. And the only groups I found that don't seem to understand that are these Soto Rinzai hybrid groups. I don't want to cast too much aspersions on them, because there's some of those that I've been to that are also very nice. But that kind of, that producing that kind of sharp, ambitious thing is really a problem. Now, one of the things I did with this guy who left that comment is I asked him, why is Kensho desirable? And there was no answer to that. I don't know if he has an answer. Maybe he didn't see my comment back to him. He saw the previous one. But I think that's the point. Why is Kensho desirable? Why do you want that thing? That is the question we should ask ourselves if we find ourselves wanting that sort of thing. Okay, that's all I got for you today. I think that I've talked enough about that, and I hope I've explained my position and what I think of as the position of the school of Zen that I practice in, the Soto school. So if you want to donate to me spending my days looking through books like this, which I had to look through all these books just to find the info to tell you that stuff, and if you want to contribute to me doing that, you can go to the URL that you're about to see on the screen below, or that you're about to hear if you're listening to the audio version, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is my only way of making a living right now, and I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy, wait a minute. Oh, don't leave. Zig, hold on. Oh my God. Ziggy, I gotta get you a cameo in the video. How you doing, Ziggy? You waiting for an enlightenment experience? Yeah? Okay. I'll let you go find your enlightenment experience. Okay, talk to you later, Zig. Bye.